Hello and welcome to Sim.pc, where right now it's 16:32 and stop. Because I need to take a bit of a water break. Should have realized that, yeah, before I started the camera. I realized that, yeah, but we are where we are and it is how it is and it goes how it goes and it flows where it goes, right? All of them good stuff. Now, before we begin today's video by a continuation of yesterday's video, which was kind of a bit of a rant in the end there, I was just like, wow, this is bloody obvious. Why are people even debating this? Might be that this video is going to be like me stating something and then just reiterating that point and just go around that point, stating the point again, because, well, I think that it's obvious, but we'll try to find some different solutions to how you can, or some different arguments for why and why not, and try to crush them as we go along, yeah? Ain't promising too much, but that's probably something along the way, so how it's gonna work, what it's gonna look like. But before we go into that, I would just start by mentioning that my tutors finally found reason. Now, this guy's probably found reason before. It was probably never out of reasons, I'd say. It was probably never insane. Probably ain't even on the brink of it, right? But we went up there, talked to him, pitched a new idea of our new research question in the thesis. And why, if you wonder, like, wow, you've been talking about your thesis an awful lot. Well, that's because the hand-in is next month. Yeah? And in my idea, you know, in my world, even though it's 1.5 months away, or, right, yeah, 1.5 months away, still feels like it could be just around the corner, right? I mean, 1.5 months for a project this big that's going to determine my entire university studies. I would rather have it 6 months away, right? That's how I feel at this point in time. That's how I felt in the beginning. It's probably gonna how I'm going to feel the day before, even though we're probably gonna be done and have reread it and proofread it and everything. But we moved up there, we presented it, right? We pitched our new idea, and he was just like, you know what? This is good. This is great. This works. You can do like simple tests, individualistic tests, just combining with the literature, and it's all gonna be good. And we were like, yay, that's awesome. And then he was like, have you done the second study though? And we were like, the second study? This is an undergraduate thesis. What do you mean by the second study? And he was like, well, I said you could do the second study last time. We were like, yes, you did. He was like, have you been working on it? And we were like, yes, we have. He was like, then you can compile it. And we're like, yes, we probably can do that as well. So that's actually what we're looking at right now. The big problem is forwarding the second study, even though there was no any pressure on it. However, that's not why you're here now, is it? You're not here to listen to me talk about my thesis progress, even though I would like to talk about that all day, every day, because that's basically the first thing I say when I see someone in school. Happened today as well. I sat down in class, looked to me right, or probably to the left, doesn't matter, this is all mirrored, right? And lo and behold, someone I haven't talked to for a while sat there, just nodded nicely, and this person just like, how does it go with the thesis? And I'm like, let me bloody tell you how it's going, yeah? And they were talking about thesis. So that's basically everything everyone is talking about all the time. Is the thesis left and right, or left and right, depending. I really need to know how this works. Anyway, but that's not why you're here. And I know that I've said that twice, but I promise you we're going to get into it. Now you're here because we're going to continue of yesterday's video and the entire reasoning of arrogance and ignorance. What? Arrogance and ignorance? But as you said, we covered that yesterday. And that's probably the response you're going to have if you didn't go all the way into the finish line, so to say. If you didn't carry it over the extra line, if you didn't go the extra mile, you probably ain't know what I'm talking about. But in the end of that entire discussion, I was talking about religious people on one side saying that God does exist, and I was talking about unreligious, atheist people on the other side saying that no, God doesn't exist, and how these two groups are very arrogant and ignorant to each other and to the argument. Yet again, we're not talking about all religious people or all atheist people. We're just talking about those people who deem to be on each respective side and still say that, well, I apply to logic. And I'm like, how could you really, when you're just reiterating the same point? Kind of what I'm gonna do right here, right now. So I'm probably not the best person to judge that. But they're talking about the same argument over and over, and they just don't go anywhere. So I'm like, that's arrogant, ignorance in seeing that we ain't moving anywhere and not realizing that. But what we're going to focus in today, as I was mentioning yesterday, is that we're going to look at that section over there, the religious people who say that, I'm applied to logic, but I still think that God exists. And I'm like, okay, sure, and I'm not meaning that in any condescending way, like applied to logic and still, so let's say, quote unquote, still think that God exists. I mean, sure, if God exists, then I'm wrong, right? I'm in the middle. Anyway, That was rambly. Anyway, we're looking at that group of people who say that God exists and, the religious. Because we're going to go into the most ignorant people of them all. And I really can't stress this point enough, because this is something that I'm going to state, and then I'm going to think, like, how can I actually make a discussion out of this? Because it's so obvious that this is really crap. And yet, there are so many people out there who just feel so strongly about this topic that they hurt each other, or that they get really mad when you talk about it, or anything else. And I'm just like, should I say this online? You know what? Probably shouldn't, but I'm going to go for it anyway. And the thing I'm talking about is that there are different religions out there. Yeah? You know that. There are different religions out there. There's Hindu, Buddhism, there's Islam, there's Christianity, there's Judaism, there's probably a whole lot more, but those are just the 5, worldly religion or whatever they call them, that I kind of know on the top of my head. Now, what is ludicrous to me? What is absolutely ludicrous to me is that the people who say, I believe in God, without having any form of evidence for it, but they still believe in God, yeah? And I believe in my God. These people, yet again, based on my own experience, right? The only thing I can really talk for or speak about is my own experience and my encounters with these type of people. And yet again, my experience is very tainted by my bias and my interpretation of certain things going down in the way that they did. So keep that in mind. But what I've been looking at when I'm seeing these kind of things are some people saying that I believe in God, I believe in this God, I believe in my God and my religion. Going to other, these kind of people, or going to other people who are of another religion and start arguing for that their God doesn't exist, but mine does. Now, let that sink in for a minute. I'm probably gonna give you a full minute to let that all sink in. And that's not just because I am lazy when it comes to discussion. That's not just because I have to make up new points. That is not because I'm a lazy editor. I just thought, let that sink in for a moment before we continue. The idea of someone being religious, saying that God exists, and they say that they deem and do apply to logic. And when people are saying God doesn't exist, they just say, he or she, the God, it, whatever, God does exist. But they can't really prove it with any evidence. Going to other people of other religions and saying that their God or gods doesn't exist. But this person's does. Let that sink in for a minute. That's about a minute. I realized that since I've been shifting the views all the way all around here, there's probably going to be more work for me in post-production in the editing process, but who really cares? So I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but if there is something that I do not appreciate, rather something that I do truly hate, it's principles without any form of logical backing. Principles that are just there because people say, well, that's just the way it is. And I'm like, well, that's not a reason. I mean, sure, it's good that you, for instance, you have a principle that says, and let's take the extreme example of why I dislike this as well. Let's say that you have a principle such as I should help other people, right? Which is a really good principle to have, but you have no idea why you have it. Now, this is one of those I might let slip, right? Because, you have a good intention at least. But the thing is, if you have no reasoning as for why you have this principle, then your intentions might not be good. You just have this because it's a principle, right? Which I still dislike. And I still really hate those kind of principles. And principles. Anyways, that's like the worst case scenario, when there is a good principle but that I still question. However, when we move into this territory, yeah, this is just like, it feels to me that these kind of people who are saying, my God exists, but yours doesn't, because there's a difference between my book that some people wrote, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, and your book that other people wrote, 1,000, 2,000 years ago. There's a clear, distinct difference here. And I know that this might come across as me mocking religion. Now, bear with me. That might be the case, but I am really envious about religious people. I would love to be religious, deeply religious, and have a deep faith to something. But I just can't get there, right, on my own. Now, that might mean because I'm not enlightened enough. That might be because I'm not really truly understanding the connection between me and God, or gods, or whatever, right? It can be many different reasons, but for me, I just can't see it, right? So if this comes across as a bit harsh, I'm sorry, that's just the way I reason. That's just the way I argue, right? Just my point of view. Please do change it if you can in the comment section below. But this principle that I'm talking about is people saying, I believe in God as a principle. No, for no apparent reason, right? I mean, sure, faith and religion and stuff like that. But otherwise, there's no real evidence for why this God should exist. And especially when you pit that against someone else who say, I believe in God too, but a different one from yours. And the only reason for this, is the same reasoning for why I believe in God. It's the same reasoning for why you believe in God. And what reasoning is that? Well, because of religion and faith and stuff like that. So we basically have two people on two different sides saying that, well, I believe in God because of these reasons, which are exactly the same reasons, because they have no other way of supporting that God or gods then exists. And still, they tell each other that the other person's religion is wrong to begin with, which is ludicrous because they're basically the same thing. They're built on the same principles, whatever, right? Might be me who's, yet again, not cultural enough to understand the differences here. And then they also say that your God doesn't exist. And I'm just like standing there like a bystander. I'm just... What? Sure, I can see the reasoning between the atheists and the religious people, right? As a collective, the religious people as a group, saying that no, God does exist because our faith is connected to God, and it's based on this connection to God that we know that God exists. That is our argument as to why. That is our evidence. But when they start fighting with each other, that's just ludicrous, because then they can't really uphold that a certain person's faith is stronger than any others, because, well, they say that all the time, or at least in my experience yet again, but that my faith is right and yours wrong, which basically means that your God isn't true, but mine is. But still, we have the same kind of motivation as for why we have a connection to God, and that's kind of the reasoning as to why God exists in the first place, which just makes the atheist group on the other side being like, ha! Now we got you, because they're saying that, well, if you guys are arguing as to which faith is right, then maybe that can't be taken as an argument as for why, God exists in the first place, which just pisses them off on this side, right? The religious people is just going up in arms like, no, that's not what we're saying. I'm saying that my faith is right, but theirs is wrong. You should listen to me, right? My argument still holds. It's just those people who are wrong because they believe in the different God or whatever, or they've read the different book, or they were born in a different nation where a different, religion was practiced, and they were just, cultivated into it, or is imported, so to say, into the religion at birth. Which leads me to a form of conclusion, because I know that I've been ranting about this for a while now, and it's just ludicrous to see that both this, ignorance and arrogance between the atheists and the religious people who just argue to something that's never going to come to a stop, as well as seeing the religious people argue against each other, telling them that, you're fake, no, you're fake, no, you're fake, no, you're fake. And do you know why this is such a big problem? Because you can't really prove that either of them are wrong in the same way as you can't prove that either of them are right. Which is, the basis for the entire atheist versus religious people argument. The same goes on in the religious camp on the other side, right? The religious people are just fighting amongst themselves. Which pisses me off. I even forgot the conclusion. That's how mad I get. Dude. Well, it doesn't seem like it comes to me either. I know this has been a video with a lot of dead space in it, right? Me walking around tinkering about reality. But yeah, this is basically how far we've gotten in the discussion. I feel like this is a good way to end it. A good place, rather, to end it. Might not be the best way, but a good place to end it. Let's just say that people are entitled to believe whatever they want, or believe. Yeah, that's actually true. Or, yeah, believe in whatever they want to. Not in a mocking way, but in, in a spiritual way. Sure, you can believe whatever you want to. And people are, entitled to believe in that same way that, God doesn't exist, and in the same way that God does exist. I just think that it's ludicrous how these two camps going against each other and just argue against each other. I would say that if God, existed, then they shouldn't need to argue for or against it, because everybody would know. But if it's based on a spiritual link, then, well, to the God, and how come that many different people have many different connections then to God or gods? Maybe then God or gods should just come down and tell everybody how we should work together so that there can be peace and harmony and love on the planet. Yay, wouldn't that be awesome? But of course that wouldn't work, because that means that some greedy men and women in power at the moment, based on religion, would be very angry because they would lose their power. Now, I ain't saying that's 100% of the truth. I'm just saying that that's kind of a reasonable assumption to make, right? That some people would benefit of religion saying, to say the least. Anyway, I know that I'm mocking religion, and that's not entirely my point here. It's obviously sometimes for comedic effect, but please don't be too hurt about that. I know I'm going to apply this to the internet. I know I don't have billions of viewers, right? But still, there might be people who watch this and be like, that's so bad. Not yet. So, from the bottom of my heart, sorry for that, right? But it's still good, still my perspective, still my point. Just putting it out there for the discussion to grow, for some insight into this entire thing. Have a nice one, mates. This is so bad. And I'll see you tomorrow with the S&R. Have a nice one.